Right, welcome back to Hyperbright Studios. What we're going to talk about today is a synthesizer which I have in the studio, which is here. And it's a Behringer rack mount synthesizer based on a Mini Moog. Now, Behringer recently released this unit to much applause from sound engineers because it basically gives you all of the features of a vintage style Mini Moog, but instead of you having to pay £2,000 for a rack unit or roughly around that amount, they managed to get the pricing of this unit down to $299, which of course people like stuff that's cheap, but it's also very good. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about some of the main features of this unit. Right, so let's just have a look at... So this is just basically one oscillator, which is this oscillator here. And what you can do with each oscillator, you can change the octave that it is based in with the switch here. So you've got really high pitched ones, and then the really low pitch ones here. Now, what you also have with the different oscillators is a different waveform, and you have a choice between 6 different waveforms. And then you have oscillator 2, which what you do is basically the mixer here determines all of the different sounds that you have. So in this instance you've got that oscillator on, you're adding that oscillator in, and then this switch would add in the third oscillator. So you can just have the second oscillator here. Now with oscillator 2 you can change the pitch of the note as well as a range. Okay, so and you can change the volume here, so you could have it on and then make it just slightly lower in volume, or you can change the timbre of the actual oscillator or the waveform. So I just knocked the tune knob there. And then with the third oscillator, you can do the same features. And then, so there are your 3 oscillators, 1, 2, and 3. And then what you have here is the noise switch, which is basically just white noise or pink noise, which you can turn on or off with that. Okay, so for now I'll just have that off because it doesn't... I think for some synth sounds it does have some uses, but I don't use it very often personally, the white noise sound. One use that you can have for it is to create snare sounds. If you had the attack really quick and the sustain... Oh, actually, am I doing this right? Ah, no. Now, that's a good point, actually. Your loudness contour here, your attack, decay, and sustain is constrained at this point here. So you can have a sustain that's really long or really short sustain. And then your decay is how long the note holds on for afterwards, so you could have a really short decay. These contours control all of the different oscillators as well as the pink noise, so you can have a really slow attack or a really fast attack at this end. Really. That turns a loud decay on. And so if you switch that off, then the decay is immediate. Your sustain is how long the note holds on regardless. Okay, so that's your modifiers. Then on this side of the desk, you have the overall tuning for your oscillator 1. So you'll notice with oscillator 2 and oscillator 3, you've got your tuning knobs here, and there's a missing one here. That's here. Okay. Okay, and then you have this button here called Glide, which is basically a portamento control. So you have really immediate portamento here, and then really slow portamento here. Okay. Now, I'll be honest, this is kind of where it gets a little bit confusing for me, because there's all sorts of controls like modulator mix controls, where you can control all sorts of modulation features within the synthesizer. And I'll be completely honest, I don't have a really in-depth knowledge of this unit. There's all sorts of things that you can do with patch cables to make certain things control certain elements of the synthesizer, and in practical use, personally, I haven't used those features very much. What we have here is a cutoff frequency. Now you have two different filter modes at the top here. You have a filter that goes and emphasizes certain parts of the frequency range, like this, and then you can have a frequency mode that actually filters out most of the high-end range, and then break comes in. Okay. Now your emphasis knob controls the extreme nature of that, so you can have a shape where it really emphasizes one particular frequency range. Okay. And then there's the amount of contour. I'll just do that in the other mode so you can see more contour, more emphasis. So in this mode you don't have actually have it cutting off the frequency ranges, you just have it emphasizing them. Whereas in this mode it actually cuts off the frequencies. What you have here is you have the attack, decay and sustain of the actual filter. So you can have the filters change the sound and sweep and so what you have is the attack, decay and sustain can change the sound of the oscillators over time with filters. Okay, so that's a rough rundown of this particular section of the synthesizer. Then here you have a reference tone, and that's all that switch does. Now, in terms of overall volume controls, you have volume control for the headphone output, which is actually what I'm using for here. The main outputs are at the back here. You'll also notice that I'm using a normal MIDI in cable because basically I'm routing this through the audio interface MIDI rather than using a USB MIDI. That's the only reason for that, really. So yeah, that's... So in terms of what I actually use this for, I've used this quite a lot in electronic compositions. Say if I want to use a bass sound that sounds very synthy, I find that when I use software synths, I have a tendency to just use presets. And having a physical control over a unit like this allows me to shape a particular sound for a track. And I think usually you get a thicker sound from using analog synthesizers like this, but I think it's also the user interface and that intuitive control over the actual unit that makes for personally, I think it makes for a more interesting dynamic in terms of how you are sculpting sounds. Personally, I think if you're approaching music from a timbral compositional perspective, using analog units gives you a lot more control over your sounds. So anyway, that's it from Hyperbright Studios. Right, I'll say bye for now, and I hope you found this video useful.